The Amiga got quite the range of puzzle games, from completely original to spins on a classic to just outright clones. And today I want to look at the ones that try to do something a little bit different, and that you could only get on the Amiga. So get your thinking caps on as we are showcasing Amiga perplexing puzzlers. And welcome to Goldfish on Games. And in no real order, we start with Bill's Tomato Game. After a daring escape with their partner from possibly being turned into a salad, Terry is grabbed by the flying squirrel. And this obviously leads us onto a game where we have to guide our tomato, oddly not named Bill, to the other side of the level via the use of fans, trampolines and other objects to make it to the exit. This has an incredible machine vibe to it, but it was actually published before it by Psygnosis in 1992. And the Bill in the name is actually one of the developers. So at the time, this still would have been relatively unique, and it still has its own spin on that classic physics puzzler genre, as between each of the major worlds you're going to have to try and climb the tree so you can get up to that squirrel. The interface is simple enough and easy to get to grips with, as you select the object from that box at the bottom, with the little green tabs being how many you have left. You can then just place them with the mouse wherever they need to go, and then you just hit the traffic lights for the whole thing to start. The number next to the lights is how many tries that you have, and yes, that number that's at the end that's ticking down is a timer. If either of these reach 0, then you'll lose a life. And this is easily the worst part of this game, as it's still stuck in that old school thinking that you need to have lives. I really feel that this would have been improved if they dropped all that and just let people work their way through the puzzles, as they are quite interesting. Between having to time things to get over the jack-in-the-box, or even the guard that will try and chase you down. And there are just a limited number of objects for you to use in each level, but there's over 100 levels for you to explore, set across a number of different worlds. And these new worlds don't just change up the graphics, but the types of things that you'll have to deal with. Like having to reverse direction, conveyor belts and all sorts of creative things. And while you might think that this is all a single screen game, some of the later ones break out of this design, and will also have timed objects for you to deal with that you don't even see. So this will take you some time to get to the end of it. Thankfully there are passwords to help you, but unless you set the disk to be writable, you might find that they don't work between runs of the game, as they effectively had 15 sets of passwords, and the game would randomly pick which one to set and then write it to the disk, which is a very odd system. Reflecting in next is Beambender, which was developed by Blue Lemon and published in 1997, and was also included in Amiga Future in 2009. This is a little bit like Deflector, as you have to bounce laser beams around to complete the levels. But unlike that game and ones that are similar to it, here we have to place the mirrors and other items into the playfield. And those options will randomly show up in the panel at the bottom of the screen. Why they just couldn't give you a list to select from, I'm not sure. You don't even have to pick an object to have to put it down just to get it to rotate out. They'll just randomly change after a little while. The goal is to set the right coloured laser to hit the right coloured exits. And the exits are those slightly coloured things that look closed. If you're colourblind, this game might not be for you, as it doesn't give any other real hints of what goes where. And to complete the levels, you just need to guide the beam from one of the emitters to the exit. So far, so normal, and for the first level, it really was just that simple. Well, apart from the nasties that like to float around and can mess with the ground, limiting where you can place stuff, but you can take them out by clicking on them. But in the early levels, it's probably just easier to ignore them. Now if you wait around too long, the lasers will do a test firing. And this will give you an idea of what will happen. But you have to be careful, as those test shots can hit the wrong thing and it might result in a laser or an exit exploding and you losing a life. And when you have finished setting everything up, just double click on any of the exits and it'll set the whole system off running. This could have been just a button on the screen. It feels they slightly overcomplicated a few parts of this game. Because as you continue, it will quickly ramp up with the amount of beams that you have to fire, the amount of colours that you have to deal with. And it also turns out the colour that they fire might not even be the right colour for the exit. Or even the right colour you need for that moment, as there's these squares that will block the wrong colour from going through them. So you'll have to place a gem to convert it to the right colour just in front of it. And then possibly have to change it again to match the exit that you need to hit. And all while this is going on, those lasers will be doing their practice shots and stopping you from being able to do anything. And obviously, things will continue to get more and more complex as you go, as there's splitters, multi-splitters, reflectors that you can rotate around. You might need to hit multiple exits from a single laser. All sorts of fun things will show up. And I have to say, more often than not, I would be coming down to the last few seconds from that timer as I was waiting for that last item that I needed to cycle around through that random item system. I really wish they just made it a regular old selection box so I could just pick what I needed. I also think it would have been better without the timer, as it would mean less about getting good luck and more about the actual puzzling. But if you can ignore these issues, then there is a really interesting puzzle game here, even if it is held back by a few odd choices. Coming through the noise is Statix, a game developed by Seventh Sign and published by Black Magic in 1994. This is an interesting one, as the goal might seem simple. Connect 3 or more of the same type of block together and they will vanish. And this is all done in that typical column style of horizontal, vertical, or at an angle. The tricky part, and the bit that makes it unique, is the fact that this is all played on a seesaw. And as you can imagine, the more blocks you place on one side will make it tilt more in that direction. So you have to balance it out if you want to keep going. You also have to be careful when removing blocks, as that might completely unbalance it as well. And I'm sure you've all guessed it, but if that happens, then it is a game over. This has quite a few options for you to play around with, as there's a regular game that you just have to try and keep going, or there's a challenge mode, where you have to complete a set of challenges to move on to the next level. There's also 2-player modes with its own set of challenges, or you having to compete on the same seesaw. This doesn't look too fancy, but it is a gameplay first puzzle game, a bit like Tictris, but it doesn't quite have the same hook as that game. But it is still an interesting idea and a lot of fun to play. And if you recognise some of the music, then you might have watched the scene demo Interference, as they shared a musician. and by all accounts, a lot of the other people that worked on this game were also from the demo scene. This is those type of pure puzzle games that I was really hoping to showcase in this video, as I was trying to avoid the stuff like puzzle platforms or puzzle shooters, as they tend to feel as much as the other genre as they are puzzlers. And one such game I was trying to decide whether we would cover or not is Mega Motion. But it turned out that they sold this in a special double pack with Statix. As they were both published by the same company in the same year, but this one was developed by Extended. So I figured that it would make for a nice link between the two titles. And in this we control a set of balls that are connected by lines. And you can pin any of those balls to the playfield, which makes the others rotate around that point. As you can imagine, the balls on the outside will give you a greater reach, and the ones in the middle will let you fine-tune where you're going. This is one of those puzzle games that can be hard to categorize, as really you just need to get yourself to the exit. But there will be blockages on that way. Sometimes you can just conveniently bash them and take them out, and thus gain points. At other times it might be something far more complicated. And as you go, the number of balls that you have to work with will change depending on the level. As some of them you'll just have 2, and that can be really complicated, but you can get some nice rhythms going. But you'll also have to deal with all sorts of other things, like keys and locks, as well as explosions, and even objects that can destroy your orbs. So it's constantly throwing new things at you as you go along, including the chain reaction blocks, or ones that you can push around. There's also a timer, but thankfully that is just about bonus points rather than failing you when it runs out. But as with a number of other games that we've seen, there is a lives system, because they were still stuck in that old school way of thinking when it came to puzzlers. And if you run out of lives, then obviously it's back to the start for you. That is, unless you remember to write down some of the passwords. There's also a number of different difficulty levels, each with their own sets of puzzles. So someone did pay some attention to Lemmings. So there is a lot of content for you to get through with this one. And I just have to ask, how do you feel about trying to deal with 5 orbs at once? This isn't a 3-body problem, this is a much bigger one. Or how about levels where there's bombs that can take out the exit? Yes, this is a fun and interesting little title. Bouncing in next is Blobz. An AGA only game that came out in 1996 and was developed and published by Apex Systems. Being a later Amiga game, this had to have touches of 3D rendered graphics. But once we get into the game proper, we find that this is a take on Lemmings, which was a title that influenced a lot of games over the years, and still was at this point. On the first level, all we need to do is use the jump ability to make the blobs jump over those 2 gaps, and thus make it to the exit. Now instead of our abilities being rationed out, we have an energy bar, which is that yellow thing in the HUD. The white line shows how much energy the current ability will use.
Mission completed.
Now thankfully we aren't just given a set amount and that's it for the entire level, this will regenerate over time, with how much energy you use on each ability and how quickly it regenerates being based on the level itself. So later levels can make it a lot harder for you. But these first few levels are all about learning how to play the game.
Slow motion.
And for that it's not too bad, even if those blobs move at quite the pace. This is much faster and more hectic than Lemmings ever was. And you really have to be on the ball if you don't want to lose any of them, as one of the main objectives will be a set amount of blobs that you have to save in the level. But to help you with this, there are a few tools, as you can pause the game and then look around, or you can make it run in slow-mo mode. But be careful with that one, as while it does make interacting with the blobs much easier as they are moving slower, it doesn't slow down the timer. So you can't just enable it and then just play the whole level that way, as more likely than not, you'll just run out of time. And if you thought this was just a simple make it to the exit style game, then you would be wrong, as there are more objectives as you go along, such as destroying a target in the level, which will require firing a rocket, or having to collect gems. Which for the most part is a simple case of making them walk into it, or jump into it, or fall into them, and once those objectives are met, then the exit will open. So you'll have to be considering all of this while making sure that your little blobs aren't walking off edges or into a baddie and dying. For a game this late, it's slightly annoying that they went with a password system rather than saving your progress. But thankfully, they did also include something much better, a level editor. You know how we like a good level editor in this channel? So any game that includes one is definitely good with us.
Jumper. Turn around. Jump. Jumper. Turn around.
Time to get excited, as up next is Excsy, which was developed by Precision in 1992, with Simulmondo handling the publishing. This is a very Amiga game, from the boing ball being in the intro, to actually being in the game. And when it comes to the game itself, it is, well, it can be very confusing. But I'll try and explain it the best I can. Our job is to guide the ball from the top of the screen to the bottom, by dropping it down the pipes. The entrance colour will match the exit colour on the next row. And you'll have to do this all the way down. But you can only switch between two options at any one step. And this all gets tricky, as you're not just wanting to get the ball to the bottom of the screen, you are aiming for a particular coloured pipe at the very bottom. And while I'm sure this is all starting to make more sense, it is harder in practice. Because on top of everything else, this is all timed. And quite aggressively timed if you ask me as well. Because I'm not sure about the rest of you, but I needed to take my time to try and trace the route up through the pipes, and even then I get it wrong some of the times. For example, here we have the purple ball, so the colour it needs to exit from is the green pipe. So we go find the green entrance, and we need to exit either the yellow or the green to get to this point, which means we then have to look at the pink or purple, or the green and blue as the starting options. And we have blue as an option, so we go down blue, then yellow, and green, and eventually we fill the right pipe. So 1 down, 5 more to go. And to complete a round, you'll have to fill all the pipes, and at least 4 of them have to be the right colour. There's also these items in this last panel of pipes that you can pass through, and they are meant to give you things, but I couldn't work out if they were just passive items or something you had to trigger. I couldn't even find a manual for this one. It would have really helped if I did. Or at least it would have given me a few hints that might have put me in the right direction. So if you know how to play this game properly and what all those icons mean, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. I think this is a relatively unique game, and it shows that that is not always an advantage. But I think there is enough here that it's not a waste of your time playing it. It looks nice and it has some neat animated touches, including a mini intro, but the core gameplay loop isn't really enough. And it seems there wasn't even enough interest in the game itself, as I couldn't even find any reviews about it. But I think it's a game that is worth a few goes, so at least you get to the point where the gameplay finally clicks with you, and you can really understand what it's trying to do. The last commercial game I want to talk about is Marbelelous 2. This is a game that came out in 1998 and was developed by Frank Otto and was published by APC and TCP, and because of that it's actually a game that you can buy right now on disc or CD-ROM. In this game we are playing with marbles, as the name might hint at, and at its core it's a get the object to the exit style puzzler. But you will need to collect other things along the way, because we need to add something to make this more complex. The controls are very simple. You use the mouse and you can click on any square. This will place a stop sign. That will, for a limited amount of time, stop the marble. But if you hold down the mouse button and then push a direction, you will place an arrow instead, that the marble will follow when it rolls onto it. And for the first level, it's as simple as that. You just need to collect that one object and then make your way to the exit. But by the second level, they are introducing a lot of things. First, there are these squares that you can only pass over once, as it will collapse into a hole and you can't go over it again. So to counter that, there's this ability that you can pick up that will place down metal blocks under the marble. So those broken squares no longer mean anything to us. But, and you knew there was a but coming, you can't place arrows or stops on those metal gratings. So you have to be very careful with how you guide the ball around. There is also this electric field that is turning on and off. But there is an armoured ball that you can collect that will help you with it. Thankfully, outside of that grating, the game doesn't tend to limit where you can place the arrows, so they can go on top of the objects that you're collecting. And as you can imagine, with all of this just being the second level, things really ramp up with this game. Later on we'll have to deal with multiple marbles at once, or even having one trigger the other. And each of them will also have to collect their own number of items to open up their own exit. And if you manage to get far enough, I've been told there is a computer-controlled marble that will be out to get us, so you'll have to avoid it. I've been playing the AGA version, but if you have an RTG card, then you can play this in 256 colour mode. Or if you have an original Amiga, there's even a low colour version for that machine. So they really tried to cater for the entire Amiga range. And on top of all of that, yes, there's a level editor. There were a few other games that looked interesting, but their commercial status was a bit blurred, like Zardoz, a game that was developed by Live Design and reportedly published in 1992. But it wasn't really reviewed, and one of the ones that I found had it in the PD review section. And no, I don't think this has anything to do with the cult movie, as this is instead a block pushing game, where you have to try and build up a picture. A simple premise, but done with enough flair to make it look worth a go. as they have some detailed looking graphics with some animated backgrounds and a range of music to select from. But it has some of the issues that we've seen with the other games, with there being lives and time. But it was good fun for a quick go. Even if it does have this slightly annoying thing where you have to remember to deselect the move block once you finish the picture, or otherwise it'll just sit there waiting for you. If this was a PD or shareware game, I think it would have gone down really well and would have been featured on all the cover discs. As a budget title in '92, I think it would have gotten some appeal, but if it was a full price game, then this would have really struggled. And it's possibly why we don't seem to know too much about it at this point. Another interesting game that I wanted to show was Tictris. This was made by Mantasoft in 2000, and it's our friends at APC and TCP handling the publishing. This isn't Tetris like the name might have hinted at. It is instead a Picross or nonograms game. So it's not exactly an original title, but I love Picross so much that I had to include an Amiga version in this video. And of all the games that we've seen so far, this might be the one that really seems to push the Amiga. Mostly because it wants a 640 by 480 resolution at 8-bit. And that really pushes the AGA chipset. So those transitions, well, they aren't the quickest. So really it was designed for an RTG Amiga. But thankfully for the most part this doesn't really matter, as we are dealing with mostly static screens that look quite nice. And what we have to do here is uncover the hidden picture. And that's done by working in what is a very nice game. Yes, that music just fits perfectly. There is a tutorial, but I just jumped right in at the first picture. And if you go straight in on the medium difficulty, well, it will start you off with a 10x10 grid. But thankfully there are easy and hard modes that all have their own sets of puzzles. The basics of the game hold up really well, as you might expect from a style that's still being made now. But this one has some nice animated touches, like when you chisel out the squares. But it would have been nice if they highlighted the row and column that you're currently over, as there were a few times when I was questioning which one I was on. And it also would have been nice if it crossed out the numbers as you completed them, but these are really just minor quibbles. And with that, we are at the end of the episode. And have you played any of these before? Or do you know any exclusive Amiga puzzle games that I missed and must try out? Let me know in the comments. Or if you'd like to help the channel grow, then there are buttons under the video that will help. You know the ones I need, I don't need to tell you about them. And until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was a set of posed puzzling perplexing problems, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. I do enjoy making these style of videos, as I keep finding new games that turn out to be really interesting, and end up having to play them. And if you enjoyed this as much as I did, then you'll find 2 more videos on the screen that I've done previously.